Hey, Tennessee's had a pretty good run during the summer months, it looks like, with how they've recruited guys they got on campus and then have committed to this point. If you look at Tennessee's 2025 class to start there, because they also got Faison Brandon and Carson Snead in 26 earlier this week, but the 25 class, does anything stand out to you in terms of what Tennessee has been able to do based on how you've evaluated a lot of these players?
Yeah, Tennessee has a really strong class right now. They're currently number 9 in the On3 industry rankings. So, tracking for a top 10 class. And I think at this point, if you're kind of in that top 10 range, like most of these top players are committed, and Tennessee we're going to talk about, I guess, a little later, could add another 5-star. So I think Tennessee is really trending towards a top 10 class under Josh Heupel. So I think it's a great sign. I think what stands out to me, I think positions that Tennessee has recruited strong, continue. I look at a guy like Marion Dye. I think Tennessee has done a fantastic job under Josh Heupel of recruiting that like edge position and getting guys who are really like traitsy, just has a lot of physical tools. I think Marion Dye he could be one of the most physically impressive prospects in this cycle. We had him at our On3 Elite Series event back in May, and we measured all those guys, like their arm length, height, weight, wingspan, and he was just kind of freakish in that regard. I think his arms were like 35 and a half inches, 6'5", 268, kind of like a lean 268 as well. And he's a guy who I think his best football is ahead of him, and he's just kind of scratching the surface. So I think he's one that's exciting. Guys that they've added recently, Lagonza Shady Hayward, I think is a fantastic football player. He's a guy who kind of came on the scene later, but he's like a kind of a big safety, could maybe grow into a box player, but physical, athletic. He's a 2-3-way, a three-phase player at the high school level. So that's what you love to see, I think, for safeties, just guys who are just pure football players. I think he's a potential difference maker. Getting Faison Brandon back in the fold, he was a guy that Tennessee was trending for a long time. Flipped it from Oregon, one of the hottest recruiting teams this summer. So I think to go into Oregon and flip a guy that they coveted is huge. So I think they've done a great job. I think to me, just continuing the positions they're recruiting strong. And I think with Josh Heupel, what I've always been impressed with under his regime is they recruit to an identity. They know what they want. They know what they want at receiver. Like Travis Smith fits what they want at receiver. They want big bodies, and then speed rushers with Marion Dye, Jaden Lofton. I think is a great athlete. And then they're recruiting the quarterback level, the quarterback position. I think at as high of a level as anyone in the country when you're talking about adding George McIntyre, Faison Brandon to the room that they already have. So I think they're doing a great job.
Charles, we look at recruiting the last 5 or 10 years. There's been Georgia, there's been Alabama, there's been Ohio State. That's pretty much recruited better than anyone else. You mentioned Oregon's real hot. Auburn's doing a really good job as well. Tennessee is hot right now. Do you feel like Tennessee is trending towards recruiting at the level of Ohio State, of Alabama, and of Georgia? There's been an uptick in recruiting for Tennessee, but do you feel like it can last?
I think so. I think the biggest thing with Tennessee is they're doing it at premium positions, right? So like I think recruiting these high level quarterbacks are going to put them, like in that kind of tier. I think when you look at like a school like Georgia, they recruit the line of scrimmage so well. So I think that's kind of been their differentiator, the line of scrimmage. Like they bring in elite linebackers. I think they recruit tight ends as well as anybody. So they recruit to their identity. They have a massive offensive line. So I think when you look at how Tennessee's recruiting, I think they're recruiting to their identity really well, probably as good as anybody. But I think it's just going to be continuing to stack that talent, that high end talent, particularly in the line of scrimmage. And I think that's going to be to me the biggest determinant on competing with a team like Georgia. Down in and down out. I think they just play such a physical brand of football. So I think for Tennessee, it's going to be continuing to stack D line, O line. And I think they're trending in the right direction. But you kind of want to see that continue to build up. Each cycle. But one thing I've noticed, guys, too, kind of I think in the NIL era, yeah, I think back to the 2019, 2020 cycles. I think the gap between the top 3, 4 schools, looking from back then to how it is now, has flattened. I think there's a lot more parity in just the kind of recruiting the national talent. So there's a little more even dispersion. And I think Tennessee's a program that's kind of benefited from that. I think when you kind of once you get outside of that, the Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, that kind of tier, the gap isn't quite as big now. So I think that helps programs like Tennessee, in an effort to kind of catch up with those schools that are in the top 3 every cycle.
We're talking to Charles Power from On3, Director of Scouting and Rankings, and you referenced David Sanders Jr. A few moments ago. He's a five-star offensive lineman, a consensus five-star guy. Why are you so high on him? If he were to choose Tennessee, he's going to announce in the next week and a half. What would Tennessee get, and how would he affect the class with his addition?
Yeah, David Sanders is an elite athlete. I think he's a guy who is extremely twitchy, a jumbo athlete. I think he's so athletic. He would probably be a 4-star defensive lineman. So he's just has a good size. He's like 6'5" and a half, 275. Has added probably 25 pounds and can really run. I mean, I would imagine he runs under like a 5, probably a 4'9", 4'8", 40. Just I think, but at his size, I think he has really good power. He's explosive. He plays nasty. He knows how to play. And I think when you watch him at the high school level match up against kind of blue chip pass rushers, he holds his own. Rarely ever makes mistakes. So I think he's a really good player right now, and he's going to continue, I think, to get bigger and stronger. But I think you're looking at a left tackle of the future. I think when you look at Tennessee, they have Zalance Hurd in there right now. I think after him, David Sanders is a multi-year starter at left tackle and is going to hold down that spot, which is obviously a pivotal position, a premium position, especially in the SEC with all the guys that they're going to be facing on a weekly basis. So he's a big time player for sure. And I think in my time doing this is probably, going into the senior year, the best group of offensive linemen nationally that I've seen just from my time doing this. And David Sanders is, kind of right there at the top. And so I think to come away with a guy who's certainly one of the best in the cycle and what might be the best offensive tackle cycle in recent memory would be a huge get.
Charles, you were very proud of James Pierce and what he was able to do at Tennessee.
Oh, yeah.
One of the only sites to have him as a 5-star, and now he is projected as a top 10 pick and an All-American preseason. Do you have that type of feeling that you had about James Pierce? Do you have that about anyone in this class for Tennessee? Maybe you guys were higher on him. You were higher on a particular player that's going to be a freshman this year versus the other sites that maybe we need to pay attention to.
Yeah, I would say off the top of my head, we had several. I would say, in last cycle, really like Peyton Lewis. I thought he had a case as being one of the top running backs in that cycle. I think we finished with him as maybe the number 3 running back. Had a great senior year, and I think he fits number 4 running back. I think he fits Tennessee's scheme really well. I think when you look at that offense and kind of dictating light boxes, this guy, he can get north-south like extremely quickly. So I think when you look at the type of backs that excel in Heupel's offense, I think he's a perfect fit. And I'm sure y'all have probably seen him at practice. Like, he's really physically imposing. He's rocked up, and he has like elite speed at that size. So he's one for sure that we were excited about coming out. I mean, I love Jordan Ross. I think I'm not sure how he's looked once he's gotten there, but extremely twitchy. Great bend. I thought his effort level was outstanding. Seeing him kind of in the all-star setting. Zalance Hurd was one, obviously signed with LSU, transferred to Tennessee. We had him as a 5-star. He was one I think we were a huge outlier on for most of that cycle. He's like just nasty and just elite length. So there are several, but yeah, I think Tennessee's done a good job of kind of identifying some of these, kind of guys who might be kind of flying to the radar. I'll give you another one too. I'm sure y'all have seen him. Jeremiah Hurd. Like, if we had known Jeremiah Hurd was going to play offensive tackle this early, I think we were the only site to have him as a 4-star, and that was kind of looking at him as a defensive lineman. If we had known he was going to play offensive tackle, I think we would have had him much higher, because I mean his measurables are elite. He's like 6'8", like 300 plus, like 36-inch arms. So he's a guy as well. I think folding it back into that offensive tackle discussion, I think Tennessee, between both Hurds, Zalance Hurd and Jeremiah Hurd, and if landing David Sanders, that is a room full of guys who have like first-round potential at offensive tackle. So I would be excited about him as well.
Oh, Charles Bauer. Oh, yeah, man. I love it.
You're talking Swain's language. By the way, Jeremiah Hurd, you mentioned him. We were talking about Bruce Feldman's Freaks List that came out a few days ago. We were talking about, okay, who are potential candidates for that in the next couple of years. Jordan Ross seemed like an obvious pick. One of our listeners said, Hurd should be somebody in the next couple of years that if he develops, he could be that kind of player. I don't know if you would say that, but it's interesting you bring his name up considering somebody else did just a couple days ago.
Yeah, he's freaky. I think the biggest thing with him is just going to be continuing to develop. But we liked his upside as a defensive lineman. It's kind of rare. I mean, I know Tennessee's had some really tall defensive linemen when you think back of guys like John Henderson, but Jeremiah's Hurd, I think putting him at offensive tackle kind of completely just changes that paradigm. And I mean, he is like a first off the bus type. And yeah, I mean, I thought that was kind of a master stroke, or kind of I love the guys that have the traits. I mean, you just can't teach the kind of physical skills he has. So I think giving him some time to develop in Tennessee's program, he's one that I would, maybe not, I don't know if he's going to play this year, obviously, but like, I think he's a guy that we could look up like in a couple of years. And everybody's like, oh, like, wow, like where did this guy come from? So definitely a name to keep in your back pocket.
Charles Power on 3. The name Faison Brandon is more interesting to Tennessee fans after he committed this past weekend. Highly touted guy. He's in the 2026 class. How does he profile? What's his potential as he still has room to run in high school before he gets to college?
Yeah, Faison Brandon's got a ton of potential. I think when we were going through looking at that 2026 quarterbacks coming out of their sophomore year, I came away just from that sophomore year evaluation thinking he was probably the best. Just the way we kind of pegged him as the number one quarterback in the cycle. Now, obviously, there's a lot of football left to go. Like he has 2 more seasons of varsity football and is only a 1-year starter at the varsity level. So, but I think when you look at his size, he's like 6'3 plus, around 200 pounds, well built. He's a plus athlete, very good basketball player. You can kind of see him tuck it and run. He's got good burst, and then he's got a very strong arm. I think he attacks all areas of the field. He shows the ability to kind of stick it in tight windows over the middle. Can push the ball vertically. Has looked good in multiple times we've seen him this offseason. And I think he enters the fall kind of that pole position as the number one quarterback in the country. Obviously was extremely coveted. Like all these top programs are going after him. So I mean, he's a huge gift for Tennessee just from a recruiting kind of value perspective, but I think he's definitely a guy who's very exciting just with his kind of well-rounded skill set. Kind of has what you look for in like the modern quarterback skill set with his ability to kind of beat you so many ways. But also too, I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing just the continued growth. Right, he's younger for the cycle. Really could be like a 2027 prospect just because he's got like the late birthday, kind of the summer birthday, which I think is another feather in his cap. So looking forward to just kind of seeing how he, grows, as a junior. Like I think for us, like seeing that continued progression, like we tend to want to bet on guys who get better and better and better, their junior and senior years. So I think he's got a great starting point. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does this season.
Swain, anything else for Charles before we let him go? I know you enjoy these segments when you're hearing about the 4- and 5-star guys who might end up
Charles
at Tennessee.
Made my day. Charles made my day. I'm good. I'm happy. Thank you, Charles.
Hey, actually, I will ask one more thing, Charles. We'll get you out of here, I promise. Speaking of the quarterback position, is there anything you're interested in seeing from George McIntyre? He has his senior season coming up there, I guess just down the road from you, right, in Nashville at Brentwood. But anything you're looking for from McIntyre ahead of getting to Tennessee next fall?
Yeah, I mean, I think for George McIntyre, it's just going to be, just continued improvement. Like he had a disjointed junior year. I think they had some protection problems. They play a tough schedule at Brentwood Academy. I mean, so he's going to be in kind of, just high leverage competitive situations. I think the biggest thing is just, just kind of seeing how he plays in general. Like for us, just production is a big deal for seniors. So I think just looking for just continued improvement. Saw him this offseason, did not get to see, he had an injury, so we didn't get to see him at the Elite 11 final. So just kind of seeing, how he's throwing the ball, moving around. Obviously, I think George is going to be a guy who's going to need to continue getting bigger, but I think that'll probably occur once he gets on campus at Tennessee rather than, while he's in high school because he's playing basketball a lot of the time. So we watch all these senior quarterbacks really close. I mean, I'll probably watch the majority of his games on film. So just kind of getting a feel for how he's developing as a player. I mean, he's got really good, pocket movement, pocket instincts, a natural athlete. But I think for me, it's just kind of just seeing the progression and just getting a better feel for where he stacks up in that quarterback group nationally.
Good stuff. Charles, we always appreciate the time, appreciate the work that you do, and appreciate the time you give us to kind of break down what you're seeing with a lot of these guys. Thanks so much for joining us here today.
No problem, guys. Fun as always.